Twice in 1 week, the Minister of Power, Aliyu, has mentioned that some individuals in the country do not want the power sector to work because of their selfish gains, lamenting that despite the number of ministers that the sector has had, the electricity sector has continued to face challenges. The minister first stated this on Monday when he appeared before the Senate Committee on Power investigating the recent hike in electricity tariff. At that meeting, Aliyu told the senators that his job is being threatened by those who dislike the reforms in the power sector and are hell-bent on not wanting the sector to work. Now, 3 days after, the Minister of Power made a similar statement in Lagos at the commissioning of a mobile power station at Ajah in Lagos State, saying that Nigeria has had over 40 ministers of power in the past without appreciable improvement in electricity supply. Now, the concerns raised by the Power Minister comes amid the recent increment in tariff, which is generating anger and misgivings from Nigerians. Currently, Nigerians classified in Band A are paying as much as 225 naira per kilowatt, even as some of them, including federal lawmakers, have complained about not getting adequate power supply. So let's listen to the Minister of Power.
Corruption will always fight back. Since you have mentioned all this, they have been after me. They've been on my neck. Oh, remove Aliyu, replace Aliyu and all that. But we know it comes with reforms. When you are doing radical transformation and the necessary reform, it will never be easy. We are prepared for all those negative name calling and dragging on the internet. It will not stop anything. Once we get to where we are going, we are satisfied. So we are aware of the corruption issue, and I can tell you that we have the trust and confidence of Mr. President, and is ready to stay with us to fight this corruption. We have cartels, we have cabals. If 3 million meters had been procured in 2003, we'll not be talking about this magnitude of gap in our military penetration. But this $200 million was converted at the rate of 160 naira to make 32 billion naira. And it was fixed in a bank for 21 years. No single meter was acquired. So we are our own enemies, we are our own problems. Government provided the money, and someone sat on the money for 21 years.
Minister of Power, Aliyu, there lamenting on what he calls cabals in the power sector. Well, to help us make sense of everything you've heard from the minister, we have joining us in the studio, former Minister of State for Power, Aliyu, is also the Secretary General of the Elite Pan-Northern Organization, Arewa Consultative Forum, ACF. Thank you so much, former Minister, for joining us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, you would have heard your current colleague, lamenting the situation and saying that there are cabals in the power sector. Let's start with it. I mean, during your time, were there cabals?
I don't know about cabal. I want to just say that there has been corruption, and there is still corruption in the power sector. And the lack of coordination of policy implementation. You know, in the past, previous ministers and previous PAMSECs that serve a particular ministry come together to share experiences and do all that and a lot of things. This doesn't happen again. And I think that is a major factor where every minister that comes throws away the gains of the previous journey.
Yeah, institutional history.
Institutional history, and then where. I'll give an example. When I was a minister, and I'm talking about 23 years ago, I was on that first signed the Mambila power project in China with the Chinese. At that time, it was supposed to be 3 billion. Subsequently, you can see the crisis went through and increasing to about 6 billion and so on. So, but since I left, nobody has ever called me, for instance, to say, look, what have been your challenges?
Despite all the crises that happened with that Mambila dam issue.
Up to this moment, nobody has called me.
That's
exactly
the problem in
so
Nigeria.
These are some of the challenges. And then again, we look at things from the procurement perspective. Everybody's thinking awarding contracts and so on, and that's not where the problem is. The problem is really compartmenting the issues and addressing them directly. If you look at the issue of generation, yes, up to now we're not generating enough. If you look at the issue of transmission, and that's why the weakness is. And I think that's what the minister is saying. After commissioning that substation in Ajah, there are quite a number of the strengthening or substantial strengthening that should be done at the transmission capability. So these are some of the things that it probably had been that, like you have National Council on Power, National Council on Education, and so on. If there's been that interaction between previous experiences and the current ones, I think there will be another thing. Another aspect of gap I've seen also. When I was the minister, I could pick my phone at any time and call the president and speak to him. I'm not talking about seeing him.
Wow.
I could walk to the villa and say, I want to see the president. And they will create the slot that I'll see him that day, that time. And if I have some information of someone that I want to introduce to him on a particular issue, I will carry your hand, and we don't need any clearance to go to the villa. I was the clearance, and so on. I understand today ministers don't see the president.
Yeah, I mean, the new system is for them to communicate through the chief of staff.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is a huge gap. I believe that if we want to address that system, our presidents, starting from the immediate past president, should be open to receive their ministers, listen to them, guide them, and interact with them. Probably that will improve the situation. But like I said, the first thing I said was the issue of corruption. We all focus our attention on the procurement aspect. How many transformers are we going to buy? How many? And that's why somebody can block some amount in the bank for some time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he's saying, actually, saying that 2003, there was a company that was given money to actually purchase meters, and those meters were not purchased, about 3 million meters. In this instance, the money was kept in the bank. And for several years, the banks have been using the money to do their business.
2003 was when I left.
Nothing has happened.
I left toward the end of 2002 to contest for the governorship of my state.
Yeah.
So the surprising thing is that all subsequent ministers have not seen this money locked in. We have the Zaria meter company that was actually producing meters. And when we were starting the NIPP, the National Integrated Power Project,
yes.
One of the things was to wake up the Zaria meter company to produce enough meter for the country. What happened to that? So these are some of the changes. Like I said, people are more interested in the procurement process or the procurement aspect of supply and power. And until we move away from that and really look at the issue, because as a country, if when I was a minister, we were generating 4,000 megawatts, and we're still celebrating 4,000 megawatts over 20 years after, I think there's an issue.
Yeah, from some of the things we've heard, I mean, actually, the minister is lamenting that, I mean, over 40 ministers have passed since Nigeria got independence, and yet the issue of power supply is still a problem because there are several groups that do not want Nigerians to have access to electricity. How true could that be?
Why will anybody not want? I mean, anybody who is a businessman, if you are producing meters, well, you better sell more meters for the people. If you are generating, you better generate so that people can offtake. If you are distributing, and so this idea of sabotaging, I don't think so. I think the minister should focus on really addressing the issues, and I will advise him to really. I know there will be a requirement for a lot of investment in the sector, substantial investment. It doesn't have to come from government. But government must still play a substantial role in pumping money into the power sector because it's still not attractive as a business in this country. And
Nigerians have are beginning to actually help the minister to provide maybe names of those cabals and all of that. One of them is that they are claiming that maybe it's generator suppliers in the country that are not eager to allow the country to actually have more power supply. And then there are others who are saying that, look, those who get all the big contracts and don't do them, like the Mambila hydro dam that you talked about over the years, just keeping it idle, could be some of those groups. Do you by chance, have a hint as to if you could be any of these
I would be surprised because even if you supply generators, how many generators can you supply after some time? And running generators now is no longer easy. The cost of powering generators is actually increased substantially. So I want to believe that we need to focus on the issues instead of the distractions. I sympathize with the minister, and anybody who picks that sector really will have a lot of challenge to do. But I think the thing has been simplified for them. When we came, there was no unbundling. NEPA was the generator, was the transmitter, was the distributor. Yeah. Before we left, we had started the unbundling. Generation has nothing to do with distribution. When you generate, the transition company is there to offtake it, But I can tell you, from the projects we started during my tenure as a minister, and expanding the transmission network and strengthening it, not much has happened up to now.
Yeah, and a lot of Nigerians are also complaining about what happened in 2013 with the power privatization exercise, and then there was the 2005 Electricity Power Sector Reform Act. Despite all of this, we haven't seen so much. So people are asking, I mean, just like the minister was sounding, helpless, is the power sector jinxed?
Not exactly. There's nothing that cannot be addressed. Like I said, the appropriate mechanism should be deployed to sort that out. We need to generate more, yes. But as I'm talking to you now, even if we generate more, we can't.
Yeah, that's what they are saying. They say we're actually generating about 13,000 megawatts, but I think it's only the wheeling capacity is just like about 4,000.
Capacity is much more than even 13,000 megawatts. But when you have a crisis now in the northeast, just one tower was brought down and everything, the whole states in the northeast are off the grid. And we've been saying that, look, the grid system, this linear system that we have, has to be addressed. For instance, why can't there be a loop from Maiduguri, for instance, to the Yola arrangement, so that if there's a problem here, you can isolate it and supply power from there? There are quite a number, with the web system, and this was discussed over 20 years ago. And that's why I say, look, if there had been interaction between the previous ministers and permanent secretaries that went through the power sector, probably some of these issues can be discussed. And not necessarily on television, but... Yeah,
I mean, politicians like you, and winner takes it all mentality. I mean, no need to go back and review. Well, okay, one-time politician. All right, could it be that the introduction of the Band A classification could also be putting the minister in trouble and all of that? And people have been saying that, look, it's against human rights for you to be classifying some Nigerians as being superior than others just because they have more money than others.
You see, the truth about the power sector is that the tariff is still very low. You have to be fair to the system.
Interesting.
Yes. The unfortunate thing is that Nigerians are not earning appropriately. Even Nigerians, because when you said, okay, the international benchmark for 1 kilowatt is so much, but what's the international benchmark for the lowest earning? This is why the challenge comes. It's the affordability aspect. But in terms of costs, or in terms of the tariff, it's still not out of proportion. But that Nigerians are earning very little compared to the demands on their pay is where the challenge is. Because when you look at the components that you bring to the power sector, they are mostly imported. And then the aspects where about 70% of our power is generated through gas. You find that the cost of gas, the initial arrangement was, I think NEPA was picking the gas at 99 cents per cubic feet. The market price about 2.7 or 2.9 dollars per cubic feet. Now, the companies have been privatized, so they have to buy at commercial rate. If they have to buy at commercial rate and expect that they will charge the tariffs will be at the same rate as it was before, that will not be realistic. So what we need to do probably is to increase the balance of the mix. We have to really look at the possibility of renewable energy. Morocco has been able to achieve substantially on solar. We have huge land, and in some parts of the country, Niger State has huge piece of land. Nasarawa State, Borno. You can have solar farms that be able to generate substantial part of the energy, and then you can now balance the mix between gas, which is costly, to the other one. And then also where we can, we should increase the hydro aspect.
Yeah, though it's been very, very expensive with the hydros. Look at Zungeru that just came on stream and how expensive that project was.
Yeah, the initial investment is high. In most, yes, even the solar, the initial investment will be high. But at the end of the day, the running of it will be much cheaper than when you put the gas turbines.
Okay.
So, and I'm talking about the mix now.
Yeah.
Why you have a lot more of the renewable energy, and you now mix it up with the carbon-based, probably then we can have a little balanced tariff. But as it is now, if you buy gas at the commercial rate and generate power, there's no way you can recover your money.
All right, as we try to round off this conversation very quickly, talk to me about when we had this crisis between Nigeria and Niger, the power supply to Niger was actually cut off. More Nigerians were suspecting that we have enough power supply after that, but I mean, not really much change. But now we've restored relations, and President Tinubu has asked that, look, power should be restored back to Niger based on ECOWAS protocols and all of that. What do you think we must have learned within that period, especially on this critical issue of electricity supply, the damming of water in Nigeria, and then, of course, the role of Niger in our relations?
What we supply to Niger is actually negligible.
Okay.
What I recall is about 80 megawatts. Now, even if it's more than 80 megawatts, it's much below what Kano consumes. So, not supplying Niger will not change anything.
Okay.
What I mean, 80 megawatts out of 4,000. And actually, we should be looking forward to generating much more than we supply Nigeria because of our opportunity. There's the West African Power Pool, which was supposed to integrate the whole.
Yeah, I remember during Obasanjo, it was a key factor then.
Yes, I was severally at the meetings of the West African Power Pool. At that time, why it was not even integrated in the whole sub-region was because of the weakness in Nigeria. Because we will be pulling down the system, we'll be collapsing the system. So we compartmented into two at that time, the section A and the section B. And we were in the section B, with Niger, Benin, Burkina Faso and so on in one sector, Senegal, Guinea and so on the other sector. And in terms of stability, they're not doing badly. So I think the issue is addressing our own challenge, even for the West African sub-region. But I can tell you that what we are supplying Niger is not negligible. It will not affect us if we stop. It will not affect us if we continue in terms of the control.
All right, just before I let you go, what should President Bola Tinubu be doing to attract more investors into the power sector? Although, I mean, some people are calling for the sack of the minister, saying that it's underperforming. What's your view about that as we head to President Tinubu's 1 year in office? And then what should he be doing to attract the right set of investors into the sector?
Until the environment changes, every minister will fail. So I don't think, like I said, I sympathize with the minister. It's not the minister's fault. But I think the minister should focus on really attracting conversation around the sector, and they probably will get some additional leeway. But for the president, the way to attract investors in the sector, like I said, is to open up the space for other sections of the energy generation, like the renewable energy, and also for government to actually make budgeting. I saw where the minister was saying that we need, is it $10 billion per
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things he told the senators yearly.
Why are we not also looking at the income into the sector? Because people pay their tariffs. Where does it go to? We're only looking at the money that comes into as investment. Okay? But this part of the 10 billion is also money that is derived from the payments from consumers. Okay? So there are consumers and they pay. And one thing I didn't mention is the issue of addressing the commercial aspect. You know, there's inefficiency in the collection.
Yeah, I mean, a situation whereby the presidency is also owing power bills,
absolutely,
government institutions and all
military,
of that.
Police,
and so the distribution companies are also complaining about collection of money.
So if government just, or rather the consumers, meet up to the responsibility, I think the discourse will also do well. So the president should make sure that sanitization of the sector, making sure that the citizens are carried along, the players, the other stakeholders are also carried along. I mean, the investors and so on are carried along. And there's an system. So you can actually appreciate the gap, where the gap is. And then government now will either through loans or through some budgetary provision and so on, provide for the gap.
And also, any word for NEC? I mean, we've seen that, in fact, recently, I think a few days ago, they unbundled TCN, where they have, a new system operator separately. And then, of course, this issue of SCADA that's been on, where you see the power, electricity, national grid going down every now and then. I mean, there are any lessons to be learned from that, and especially, any word for NEC?
Yeah, the transmission aspect has to be substantially restructured, and some commercial dimension should be brought into it. Because just like a pipeline where power just passes to the others, and I'm not sure that they earn substantially from that service. So they need to be restructured, and then some aspect of it that can be commercialized should be commercialized. Right. But then substantial investment has to go to the transmission. And for the distribution companies also, I always say that, look, they come and met an infrastructure that is aged or that is weak, you know, and they have to strengthen it. Most of the distribution companies have refused to invest substantially in the sector. It just looks like a cow that is standing that they can just milk straight. My own thinking is that whoever bought a distribution company should know that he should invest for a number of years to expect returns.
All right. Several politicians bought this distribution companies not knowing that it was going to be a really, really technical.
It was going to be like the telecommunications.
And they've been finding it very difficult actually since that.
Yes.
Well, we must thank you so much. Murtala Aliyu is former Minister of State for Power in the Obasanjo administration, and he's also the Secretary General of the Arewa Consultative Forum. We must thank you so much for your immense wealth of ideas. And one critical thing that we'll take home with this interview is that you said that when you were minister, you had direct access to President Obasanjo, unlike
Anytime.
what's happening.
At any time.
And that could actually boost investment in the sector. We must thank you so much for joining us to help us clarify issues.